the classic, right? If you have $100 and one person goes empty, you're still 99% occupied. You have one property and one person goes empty, you're 100%, Plus, I like in multifamily as well that you're in more control, because if you control the NOI, the net operating income, increase the rents, reduce the expenses, you increase the value of that property, regardless of comparable sales in the area, right? It's just more control, which I really liked.
Barri Griffiths, aka Mason Ryan, you're the man. Thank you for joining our podcast, man. We're excited. I had a blast. I know I had fun coming on your show, but man, you've been around. You've done some exciting things. We're honored to have you here, man. Honestly, and would love to hear about your background, your career. You've got some crazy, exciting things with Cirque du Soleil and WWE. It's really inspiring and fascinating to look at from the outside. So it's cool with you, man. Would love to just hear a little bit about your story and get to know you, and we'll just jump in and ask questions. We just like to add value to our listeners and, inspire entrepreneurs. And you obviously have done a lot. So would love to jump in, man, and hear a little bit more about you and your career.
Yeah. Let me try and condense on what make it interesting, like not give you the boring stuff. So basically, grew up in small town Wales in the UK. Wales is a country. It's kind of the forgotten country. I always say that everyone knows about England, Scotland, and Ireland, but not everybody always knows about Wales. But we are a country. We have our own language. Grew up there. It's tiny, tiny little town, and I mean tiny, right? 200 people, no stoplight, 3 pubs, which was pretty funny. So grew up there, but always wanted more. I always wanted more for my life. And I don't know where that necessarily came from, but I always knew that small town wasn't where I kind of wanted to live the rest of my life for whatever reason. And to this day, I'm not entirely sure, but I just knew that I wanted more. I always strive for more. Grew up sports mad, playing any kind of sport that I could, and eventually got into weightlifting and training, and just loved that. I would be training 7 days a week, trying to eat healthy. And I got to a point where I created a physique for myself. I was 6'6", 280, and I was like in the gym on a Saturday night, and all my friends were down the pub getting hammered. And I was like, well, that's not really the life I enjoy anymore. I would do it occasionally, but I was like, well, I'm dedicating all this time to training. And I was working for my dad at the time as a carpenter, probably the worst carpenter in the history of the world, because I hated that. I'm not handy at all to this day. I don't fix anything. I don't do any DIY. I don't do any of that because I just really hated it for some reason. So I was the worst carpenter in the world, but I was doing that job and I just wanted more. So I was like, saw wrestling on TV one day and I was like, I think I can do that. Those guys kind of look like me, that, and I'm kind of athletic, kind of big. I think I can do that. So I went down the rabbit hole trying to find out how to be a wrestler, but I was in a small, tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't really internet at the time. You hadn't all this wealth of information. And luckily, a few months later, a tiny little wrestling show came to my town, and I went there, met with a promoter. He saw the way I looked. We connected, had a good talk, and he said, "Hey, have you thought about being a wrestler?" I said, "Well, actually, I kind of have." So I started training with him, started wrestling in the UK. Wrestling over Europe. And then I got a gig for Gladiators. So the UK version of US Gladiators, when they have contenders and the gladiators that fight them and they have all these events. So I did that. I was one of the gladiators called Goliath. So I did that. And then through that, I got in touch with WWE somehow. And I ended up going to one of their shows in London where they were there. And they signed me up pretty much there and then. I signed the contract and moved to Tampa, Florida, went to their training school in Tampa, Florida. And then a year later, I was on TV, made my debut on Monday Night Raw, WWE Monday Night Raw, in front of, I think, probably 5 million people or something like that, which is kind of crazy. And I was in that world for about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years after that on TV and stuff like that, and doing pay-per-views and, really living kind of a cool life. Been to probably every city in the US. Couldn't tell you which ones I've been to, except if I went to the gym or the airport or the arena, right? That's where you go. You don't see these cities, but traveled all over the world, did pay-per-views, wrestled John Cena, wrestled Kane, wrestled Randy Orton, wrestled some big names and did some cool stuff. And then that came to an end in 2014. And I then wrestled independently a little bit, and then got a job with Cirque du Soleil, just kind of randomly out of the blue. I was living in Florida at the time, then packed all my bags and moved to Las Vegas. And this is where I'm now working for Cirque du Soleil at the show Car at the MGM Grand. But where real estate came into all of this was in 2014 when WWE didn't renew my contract, which I was expecting to, and it just came out completely kind of out of nowhere, to be honest with you. I had just bought a house. So I bought a house in January, and then in April, they didn't renew my contract, and it was an expensive house. And I was like, oh, geez, this is perfect timing. You know, I couldn't really turn around and resell it without being at a loss. So I didn't want to sell it because I loved the house, and I couldn't emotionally bring myself to sell the house after losing my dream of WWE. So went down the rabbit hole of renting it out, of finding out how to find renters, how do you screen them, blah, blah, blah. You know, led me to bigger pockets, I think, led me to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then opened this whole other world of real estate investing. And then since then, I've become hooked. I got just hooked by it. I was just like, this is, not only can it be a plan B, which I realized I needed, right? Because I didn't have a plan B. My plan A was to be the world heavyweight champion. Plan B was to be the world heavyweight champion. And plan C was to be the world heavyweight champion. I had no other plan because I didn't need it, right? I didn't need it. I was going to be the world heavyweight champion. I didn't need any other plan. So then I realized I needed something else. But also I fell in love with real estate because also of the lifestyle that it can create for yourself, right? It can be whatever you want it to be, right? And you can create whatever lifestyle you want with that. So I fell in love with that. And I it's kind of like when in the Matrix, when Neo like decodes the code at the end, and he's able to like dodge bullets and everything like moves in slow motion, and he's able to see like that's how it was to me when I realized about real estate investing. Opened this whole other world to me, and I was like, wow, I just fell in love and dove in, and I've just been kind of obsessed and addicted ever since.
So man, walking out in 5 million people, I want to ask about that in a second, but before I get there, like learning about real estate, diving in and kind of understanding it a little bit different after some time of never thinking about it and being focused on wrestling. I'd love to hear your perspective on that first house you bought. Looking back, are you like, what the hell was I thinking? Or how do you view, not that I'm judging you by any means, but like, 100%. Is it like, man, I just had no idea? Is that how you kind of do that?
100% it was. And actually, I somewhat had an investment thesis in my head, but I knew nothing about investment. I was buying it because I loved it, but I was looking at properties on the water because for some reason I thought, oh, there's only a finite amount of water, so if I buy in water, it's going to go up. I think someone told me that, and I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to do that. So I bought this property on water. It was on a lagoon that went out to the sea that it had sea access. But that was the only investment thing I had. The rest of it was like, I like the layout, I like the neighborhood, I like the color of the walls, I like the kitchen, like nothing that really creates value, right? And I bought it maybe above what the value of the home was at the time, maybe because, it's just what I kind of did at the time, because I was just like, okay, I love this house, and I really like, and I was really at the far end of what I could afford in terms of what the loan they would give me. I put, I don't know, 30% down or something like that, 35% down, just to make sure I qualified, because I didn't have any credit history at the time either. I didn't understand credit at the time. This is how little I understand about finances at the time, because I was brand new, right? I moved over here in 2010, had zero credit moving over here. And it wasn't like I had bad credit, but I didn't know how to build it either. So at that time, I think my credit was low 600s or something like that, trying to qualify for a $430,000 property, right? So it was challenging. So yeah, I bought that with zero investment criteria, really, apart from it being on the water. So looking back, it was just didn't make any sense, because for one, the CDD fees was super high. It was in a really nice neighborhood. HOA fees was really high. So even if I'd done the calculations, right, okay, worst case scenario, my loan is this much, what does it rent for? Can I still rent it out? But no, I didn't even look at that. Didn't even know to look at that, right? And it was just a pure emotional buy. Like, it was just a typical person that's buying a house that they want to live in kind of buy. So I knew nothing whatsoever back then. And like you said, looking back, I was like, what was I thinking then? I could afford it. My monthly payment was $2,550 a month. So and this was back in 2014, so 7 years ago. So it maybe doesn't seem that much now, or it is a good amount, But back then it was a lot, and I was making six figures at that point. So I was like, all right, I can afford this, right? I can, you don't really think too much. It's like, okay, I can afford it, so I'm going to buy it. I'm going to pay it because I like this home. But looking back, yeah, I definitely would not have bought that. I would have done something different. And the thing that kind of sucks, you should never really look back, right? Because everything that's happened in the past brings you to where you are. But it's hard not to look back at Florida in 2014 and think that I couldn't have bought a killer deal, or 2 or 3 killer deals at that time in Florida, in Tampa in 2014. I think it bottomed out about 2011, 2012 there fully. So I was still like just about coming off the bottom then. I could have bought some killer deals.
Yeah.
So that can be painful, but everything else is, it leads me to where I am today. So you can't really look back too much. I don't think.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And, I can imagine not getting that contract renewed and having the house is somewhat of a hard situation, maybe a low point. And it probably forced you to get creative, and you found bigger pockets, and now you're investing in doing multifamily. And so, maybe like you said, everything happens for a reason. It's always easy to look back, and maybe you would have bought those 2 properties and had those 2 rentals and then done something else and never got more into real estate. So, was that for you when you didn't get that contract renewed? Was that a dark place? Like, fuck, what am I going to do? And then you just had to get as creative as possible. And that's how you came across real estate?
A little bit of both. So, but you're right there for sure. I don't think I would be in real estate, be where I am. Maybe, who knows, right? Who really knows? But definitely, like, challenging times and bad situations, if you don't let it can lead to other good stuff. I've interviewed so many people where they talk about something that negatively impact them, but that led them down a path of getting to somewhere else, right? So I may never be here talking to you guys, may never have found multifamily, never invested in real estate, apart from maybe living in a house, and I would never really have figured out my finances and became a lot more financially literate. So even though, and plus another thing on that as well is that I'm home every day I have a 16-month-old son and my wife, and I'm home every night, and I can go to the gym in my local gym, and I'm not traveling. Because when you're traveling with WWE, you're gone 5 days a week. You leave Friday morning, first thing Friday morning, 4 or 5 a.m. Friday morning, you leave, and then you get back Wednesday afternoon. So you don't even have a day and a half at home. And in that day and a half, you still got to go to the gym, still got to cook all your food, still got to do your laundry, still got to pay your bills, got to take care of whatever, right? And it would have been, I could have done it, and it would have been cool, but I don't know how much I would have enjoyed it at this point, doing that year after year after year, being away from home, being away from my kid, all that stuff. So not only did it lead me to real estate investing, but I think it essentially led to a better life for me, I think. And at the time, like you said, it was a dark time. It really was like, it was a point where I just really was questioning my life to some extent, right? Not in terms of a dark place, but in terms of who am I, right? Because I was at that point, just being honest, I was at the point where I was identified as a wrestler. I'm a wrestler. That's what I do. I'm going to be a wrestler for the rest of my life, right? And then all this comes crashing down, and I had to be like, well, who am I? What am I going to do with my life? I'm 30. Well, how old was I? 32, 33. What am I going to do with my life? And it wasn't necessarily a midlife crisis, but I had to do that. So that, along with that, I think it opened up the world of real estate investing, because also I was like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? Okay, I would love to be a wrestler for the rest of my life, but how sustainable is that, right? And that then brought me to sort of, I think, along with the financial situation, thinking about real estate investing and being open to other opportunities, because I wasn't before. I was a wrestler. That's what I'm going to do. I don't need to do anything else. I'm going to make a lot of money doing that. I'm going to be fine. Don't need investment. Don't need a plan B. Don't need anything else. But I think that point, it was a low point, no doubt about it, right? My dream had come to an end, but that led me to something else, right? And I think it's led me to a much better place, and to where I am today, to where I'm very happy, and everything is, I'm in a great place in my life, I think, and I don't think that would have happened without that. So essentially what I'm saying, I guess, is adversity and tough times, if you really work through it and you figure things out, it can really lead to so much more, I feel like.
That's right, man. And it's never as bad as it seems when you're in that moment, looking back.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. At the time, it's terrible, right? You think
right.
The whole world comes crashing down. But like you said, when you look back, it's like, well, really, was it that bad? I had a roof over my head. I had money in the bank. I had all kinds of possibility. I had my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. There was so much to be thankful, and it really wasn't that bad, right? You just needed some perspective. But yeah, that's so true.
So when you so after that, and you got this house, you're working on renting out the property, and you are on Bigger Pockets, and you're reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. What kind of led you? What was the path after that in real estate?
Yeah, so I eventually rented out. We had a renter, and I actually had to be negative cash flow. So I think I rented it out for $2,300. So I was about negative cash flow, about $250 plus any expenses that I incurred at the time. So those that wasn't ideal, but I kept a hold of the property, and I didn't really understand real estate, and I thought, okay, this is just kind of what it is, right, and how it kind of goes. So I did that. I was like still looking into researching and finding out a little bit about real estate. And I moved to Vegas in the end of 2015, December 2015, and was definitely looking at properties there. But I was like, I don't know if I want to buy when I go there. Let me just rent. So I rented, and when I was here, I really dove into it. I really was listening to podcasts every day, reading Bigger Pockets every day, and got in touch with a real estate friendly investor here, and started looking at properties, and found the property when I was still renting. So I bought an investment property before I bought a house to live in here. It was a townhome. I bought it for $173, but it was a foreclosure, fixed it up. So it was about 10K into it, and then rented out for about 1,300. So it wasn't necessarily the 1% rule that everyone talks about, but it's still cash flow because I fixed it up. So it was a foreclosure, new flooring in, painted everything. It didn't need new bathrooms, new kitchens, but spruced up those places, and everything had been done. So there wasn't much repair and maintenance. And the good thing about here in Vegas is there's no state income tax, right? So it increases your margins there. And plus the landscape, it was a townhome, so I didn't have to take care of the landscaping and stuff like that as well. It was including the HOA fee was like about $95. So I think after all that, I cleared about $300 a month, and it really was usually about $300 because there was barely any repairs and maintenance. I had a great tenant, so everything kind of like that worked out. So I was like, okay, this is great. I still had that other property in Florida, even though it was kind of a little bit cash flow negative. I had that one, and then I bought a primary residence, which was another foreclosure that I was going to live in for a year, and then turn around and rent that. And I thought, so at that time, I still wasn't that aware of real estate, right? In terms of knowledge on stuff, I thought you just buy single family homes, you buy them on the MLS, you put 20% down, and then kind of that's how it goes, right? But I figured I knew that you need to figure out what your freedom number was, right? What your number you wanted to get to. So I knew I needed to reverse engineer from there. So I figured out I needed 40 properties at 40 single family properties, cash flowing $250 per door, putting 20% down, or so that would be four. And my goal is 10 years. So 4 properties a year for 10 years. 3 of them I would buy 20% down, and 1 I would buy owner occupied every year, right? That was my unrealistic and sort of, I don't want to say stupid, but just what I understood at the time, right? And I was like, okay, this is and I was trying to figure out, how do I save every last penny? Can I make a little bit more? What can my wife do to make a little bit more money? Because I knew what the average median home price was here in Vegas roughly, and what I was going to pay, and then what I needed to buy, because that's what I knew. And then one day someone opened up my eyes to multifamily investment, and basically said, hey, you can get to $40 in one property essentially. I was like, whoa, okay, so I don't have to wait 10 years and save every last penny and blah, blah, blah. So, and obviously all the other aspects of multifamily that I really like as well, you have the classic, right? If you have $100 and one person goes empty, you're still 99% occupied. You have one property and one person goes empty, you're 100%, Plus I like in multifamily as well that you're in more control, because if you control the NOI, the net operating income, increase the rents, reduce the expenses, you increase the value of that property regardless of comparable sales in the area, right? It's just more control, which I really liked.
Love it. So I got a quick question for you. So now having your world opened up to the beauty of multifamily, do you think you'll ever buy a single family rental again?
Yeah, actually, because a few things. One, I like the idea of buying one property and living in it for a year and then doing that. So what my thing is with that is, if I buy a $400,000 home here in Vegas every year for 5 years, that's a $2 million portfolio that I bought with 5% down of that, right? And that, as long as they're cash flowing a little bit, that can be my nest egg that's paid off over 30 years. That's $2 million. Even if it doesn't go up a cent in value, that's $2 million there that I've created. So definitely looking to do that now. But my main focus is definitely multifamily. Definitely multifamily, yeah, for sure. And I'm also looking a little bit into buying some Airbnbs, but just a couple, because there's a thing called a vacation rental loan that you can get in with 10% down. So I wouldn't take too much of my time. I would just buy a property, maybe try and get it below market, buy it on the MLS and just do an Airbnb with it. But that's not going to be taking my focus. As you guys know, I'm sure, right? It's important not to be all over the place and keep your focus on one thing. So I am still interested, but I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on it. You know what I mean? So, because I think it's a good balance as well, right? You can have some single family homes as well that you own and you control. With multifamily, the bigger you go, the more you need to partner and bring joint venture partners, or do a syndication, and it's not necessarily the same amount of control. Even though you can make more money and grow more, it's not the same level of control. So I think it's nice to have a little bit of a balance, but you're definitely very focused on multifamily.
Got it. I love it. Well, you didn't answer the way I thought you would.
Alex, wait. What he was trying to do right there is set you up for what him and I debate on.
Okay.
Hours and hours. And
which one is better?
Well, not necessarily. Because you didn't answer the way he wanted you to. So I win this debate.
What did you want me to answer? What did you think?
He wanted you to say, no, you're never going to buy another single family home. It makes sense to put all your money into multifamily, and where you live, you're going to be a renter because you're going to make more money on saving on not owning that house and putting that money into multifamily. But you answered the way I agree, which is have a mix. Get that investment property, get the personal residence, save on the taxes, have some diversity. And I get both sides. I don't knock him for the way he thinks. Everyone's, got a different approach, and he's not wrong. But we debate on this for hours, and we've never come to a conclusion.
I think it depends. Right? It's like, I get it. You rent, so you don't have any money invested in that property, right? But for me also, depends what you're going to do with that property. If you're going to live in that property for the next 20 years, maybe it's not a bad idea to rent, because you're not going to ever get any income for that. You're probably not going to sell it, right? But with me, the way I see it, I have no problem moving every year. Luckily, I have a wife that's okay with that. If I didn't, that would be maybe a little bit different. So I'm going to get in with 5% down, right? If I buy a 400 grand home, right, that's going to be 20 grand that I buy that home with, right? That's not a lot of capital. It's some. Don't get me wrong, 20 grand is still 20 grand. I'm not saying that it's not a lot of money, but it's not a huge amount to buy a 400 grand home. So, and just do that once a year. So I can get in with low money down. Now, if I had to put 20, 25, 30% down, I think I would think very differently, because I would rather that capital be in multifamily. But I feel like it's such a low hanging fruit. I like low hanging fruits. I don't know about you guys, but it's such a low hanging fruit to me that I can get in with 5% down. Even if I buy on the MLS, just buy something that needs a bit of work, that buy it for 5% under market, which I don't know if I can even do right now, to be honest with you, with how hot the market is. But, it's such a low-hanging fruit. But I also get the other argument of that you want your money always working for you. Because if you have a property that you live in that you own, you're number one, you have some capital invested in it, right? You probably have equity that's stuck in it as well. But you've also got to fix it up. Any problem that happens, any repairs and maintenance, the roof goes, the water heater goes, the HVAC system packs up, right? You're responsible for that, right? Whereas if you're renting, you never want anything to break, because we're landlords ourselves, right? We don't want someone to go that, but it's not your problem, right? You just say, hey, Mr. Landlord, this broke. Can you fix it, please? So I get both sides of the argument. But it depends. I think it depends, like anything in real estate, right? It really depends on your situation and what you're trying to achieve, and just your outlook on things, I think, as well.
It's all about the deal too, right? Like, if I can get a single family home for 10,000 and it's worth 300,000, I'll buy it all day long.
Well, if you can find those, send them my way.
Well, a couple of things. I think that there's more opportunity, in my opinion, at least from the way I view things, is to find the value in the single family homes. And that's in our market in Austin, Texas. There's very few apartments, and they're extremely competitive, where you can go find these houses at a massive discount on single family. And like you said, if you're putting a 5% down payment, let's just keep it simple. Say a $400,000 house and you put 10% down, 40 grand, and that property goes up 10% in that year, which there's a good chance that it would. Well, you just doubled your money in 1 year or 2 years. And then the other thing is, if you're a renter and like you said, we don't want these things to happen to a house, but the expenses that come up, I believe at the end of the day, you're still paying for those. You're going to get a rent bump, something's going to happen. And because ultimately the way I view it is you're either paying your mortgage or you're paying someone else's. And that's, I know that that's not the exact answer, but that's some things that stick out from everything we just said.
Yeah, I don't know if they could, but if you're at market rent already, they can't bump rents more than market rent. You know what I mean? They can do maybe a 3% increase, but it's going to be hard for them to say, hey, the water heater went out last year and there was a leak, so I'm going to go from $1,400 to $1,550 because I need to cover for that. Even though the market is $1,450, they're not going to be able to do that, I don't think. But I do get.
Yeah, you're right.
It's all right. I think we can all just agree that it's better to rent and buy multifamily.
But what I like about multifamily is I think you do create more wealth, though, because it's usually, and I'm talking about, 15, 20 plus units here, right? I'm not talking about a 2 or 3 family, right? I think, if you're talking 20, 30 units, right, we're talking probably millions of dollars here. And with that, I think you can create more value if you buy right. Okay, you go on LoopNet and buy just whatever you see. It's not necessary, but if you buy right, I think you're able to create a lot more value and create more wealth with that. But also, just me, I see both sides. I like single family, I like multifamily, even though I'm mainly focused on multifamily.
We need to keep this going. We need to move this to Clubhouse and have this debate on Clubhouse.
Yeah.
Hey man, so talk to us a little bit more about other than real estate. We always talk real estate and we love it, and people can reach out to you directly to hear more, and I'll ask you at the end how people get a hold of you. But I want to hear about walking in front of 5 million people and Cirque du Soleil and performing. Like, is you get a rush every time you do this, and you love that feeling? What's it like? Well,
when you walk out, like you said, in front of 5 million people on wrestling, it's 5 million people at home, obviously, right? So it's not necessarily, it's just a camera lens. So all you're looking at, you kind of get an idea, but that's hard to fathom, right? 5 million people, and you don't really think about it. It's the audience is usually about, I don't know, between 12 and 20,000, depending on the arena. So it's more about the people to some extent. But also what I found as well is you're so focused on what you're doing, you don't really pay attention to what's going on, because obviously you're nervous. I was just starting out, even a year and a half in, right? I'm still kind of new at that point. You still get nervous. You're still focused on what you're doing in that ring and the training that you had and what you need to do and what you're trying to achieve in that match. So you're so focused on that, you don't always get a chance to even think about like what's going on. You're in character, you're focused on what you've got to do in the match. So you don't even necessarily see the 20,000 people on there. You see them, of course, but you just blink. That's how I was anyway. It didn't really affect me. And I never once thought, oh shit, there's 5 million people watching at home. I got to make sure I don't mess up. I just didn't want to mess up in general. So it's an interesting dynamics that, because you need to be focused on what you're doing, it's hard to imagine anything else and see anything else, right? And you do pay attention, and I'm not saying that it's completely invisible, all this crowd that's around you, but it is a rush. There's no doubt about it. And the live events actually is where more the rush was, to be honest, because on live events they're not filming it, because usually what happens is you on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you do what they call live events. It's non-televised. It's just in front of the people that are there. So the pressure isn't as much, right? You don't have to get everything perfect, because with camera never lies, right? There's no forgiving if you mess up in front of a camera. But if there's something that's not quite right in a match in front of an audience, in an arena, it's not the same, and the pressure's not the same, and you're able to also play to the crowd a little bit more. Whereas when it's TV, you're just focused on doing that for the TV. It's a TV show, right? It's a TV show with a live audience. When you're doing a live event, it's for that live audience. So you're catering to them all. So you're able to pay attention more. You look around, you pan to their audience. So that was always the fun part to me, was in front of a live audience like that. And then fast forward to Cirque du Soleil. I enjoy Cirque du Soleil. I love it, actually. It's great. but the crowd participation isn't the same. You're not playing to the crowd. You're always just playing a character in that show, and you're always standing here. There's always something slightly different because you play with your character and you play with how they feel and all that stuff, and there's an evolution, and there's always something going on. But essentially 10 times a week, I'm standing here, I'm standing there, I'm walking here, I'm doing that. Now, I might be thinking different things as a character, but it's very much the same. And it's not the same as you do a move in a wrestling match and the crowd goes, whoa. They don't really, in Cirque, they more just clap at the end of an act or something like that. And they don't always do that. So it's not quite the same rush, to be honest with you. Even though I love the job and I love what I do, it's not quite the same rush.
That's pretty versatile. Can you think of anyone, or is it common for anyone to go from WWE to Cirque du Soleil? I mean,
it's pretty random. It's pretty random.
You might be the only one ever.
I think so. I don't know for sure, but I think so. But I was lucky. So I'm not acrobatic at all. For anyone who knows Cirque du Soleil, they might think, my God, this guy is acrobatic. He was in wrestling, but I'm not really. I can do a forward roll, maybe a backward roll on a good day. But our show is very, there's a lot of choreographed fight scenes in the show. It's an Asian-based show, so there's a lot of mixed martial arts. So essentially all I do is I play a character because ours has a storyline, and I do fight scenes, choreographed fight scenes. So there's no acrobatics on my. So luckily I wouldn't fit into, I think this is probably one of the very few shows that I could actually fit into in Cirque du Soleil, because the rest are very acrobatic, very sort of circus. They're a circus, right? They're a circus show essentially that's just been magnified 10 times and made it's a spectacle.
Yeah. What about any like amazing memories or big mistakes that you think of when you think about that WWE career? Any cool aspects that really stick out for you?
The coolest aspect, I think, for me, or the coolest moment for me, was, for anyone who's a wrestling fan, there's a thing called the Royal Rumble. It's basically where everyone gets in the ring and everyone's trying to throw each other out. Whoever's left standing is there. And it's like one of their biggest pay-per-views, and it has done in history. So as part of that Royal Rumble, it was in the Boston TD Garden, right, where the Celtics play. So huge place, 20,000 people, massive, massive. Boston people like rap loud and like ruptures and just enjoying it. So there was a point in the match where a famous wrestler called Booker T was going to come in, and we were going to throw him out. And I knew this was going to happen. We were in the match, we were doing the thing, blah, blah, blah. And like I said, you focus, you don't think about it. And I kind of forgot about what was going to happen next to some extent, because I was too busy doing what I was doing now, right? You can't think about what's next when you're doing something right now. So anyway, that happened. And then we kind of had a moment where we were kind of stopped for a second, and he was going to come out. And he came out. And they didn't know that he was coming. And the place just went nuts. 20,000 people just going absolutely ballistic, which was amazing in itself. But the cool thing it was, because I was part of like a group, there was like 5 of us, I think. We had the moment to enjoy that, because we were standing in the ring waiting for him. Usually you're too busy doing stuff, like I said, and focused. That was a point where not only were the people going crazy, and there was so much noise, like the loudest noise I've ever heard in my life, but we had a second to enjoy. So we could, like, you play your character, right? You're looking around like you're mad and you're angry at the crowd for enjoying this. But reality, I'm looking around and just seeing people in row Z right at the top, like beers are going everywhere. They're high-fiving each other. Like kids are like screaming their lungs out. It was just so cool, because not only were they loud, but I had the chance to really soak that in. I think that was like probably one of my favorite, coolest.
That's cool, man. That I can kind of envision it the way you're telling it. That's awesome. Well, hey, man, like we only have a couple minutes. We got a little timeline on our deal sometimes, but what are ways people can reach out to you? And just to be clear, like, you are raising capital for multifamily investments. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have. I'm involved in the group. There's 4 of us. We call it team, and we've actually. There was a wrestling stable called Four Horsemen before, so we stole that name. There's 4 of us, so we call ourselves Four Horsemen Capital. So you can go check us out at fourhorsemencapital.com. But also personally, I have my podcast, I have YouTube, I have Instagram. The best place to find out more about me is to go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com. So if you guys go there, there's all the information that's there. So wrestlingwithrealestate.com is the best place to go.
and maybe you'll catch him on Clubhouse one of these days.
But I'm joining right after we get off this call. You got me hooked now. I'm gonna be on there.
Cool, man. I hope to see you there. It's really cool to hear about your career. I know there's a lot more to it, but love it, man. And excited for you and your family and the journey in real estate. We're here to help out. Before we sign out, is there any way that the listeners can add value for you, or any last things you want to touch on?
No, just if anyone wants to find out more, I have a podcast myself called the WWRE Podcast, which stands for Wrestling with Real Estate Podcast. So if you guys want to check that out, go to my Instagram, WWRE Podcast, and go there, check me out, and just reach out to me if you have any questions or just want to chat. I love real estate, and I love talking. Probably that comes through.
You're the man.
So you just reach out.
There's no one at the local gym that can outlift you, right?
There probably is. I'm getting old now. It's just turned 39. I'm not as strong as I used to be. Back in the day, probably not.
Well, thanks so much for your time, man. You are the man. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. This is awesome.
Thank you.